Hey, welcome to the Hemet Film Festival podcast here. This is Daniel Maggio speaking. And this time we are interviewing Gabe. So Gabe is the one who's been interviewing everybody else leading up to the start of the festival. And now we are flipping the tables and we're asking the hard questions on Gabriel Diaz.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm so glad to be getting interviewed by you this time. This will be a lot of fun.
Hey, you're not going to interview yourself, even though I would listen to that.
That would make two people that would
You
listen to
have
me
the what?
interview myself.
I'm your fan. And so if you're watching the video version of the podcast right now, you're probably wondering what this background is behind us. And so if you're from Hemet, you have an idea of what this might be. If you're not from Hemet, you have no clue what this is referencing. And that's okay, but this is what this podcast is all about, is education, Hemet education. So Gabe, would you like to talk about what this is behind us?
So yes, we had growing up a Gary's TV and Video, which was a video store, and I don't honestly remember how many times I went into it. They had a ton of different things, right? Like they'd kind of dip their hands in a bunch of things, but it was always the like that's a movie store option you can go to. We had that and Superstar, and that was about it for a while till we eventually got a Hollywood and we were on the map.
Right.
And
Yes.
it had this amazing mural on it.
Yes. There was this mural on the side of the building painted by an artist named George Sportelli. His brother-in-law is actually the owner of Datillo's. And
Oh, okay.
so Sportelli also did the murals inside of the Datillo's Italian restaurant in Hemet. But very iconically, you would see this giant mural on this video store that had all of these characters that you see behind us. And unfortunately, we have two reversals of fortune for Gary's TV and video. So at first they had to close,
Yeah.
and then shortly after, Superstar Video closed. So there are no video stores in Hemet anymore, sadly. And Gary's TV and video had to close, but this building was just still standing vacant on this lot for maybe 10 years or so. And at one point I was like, we should buy this building because it's just sitting there. I was like, this would be a great headquarters for the film festival, just like, why not? Why couldn't
it,
we buy this
it would have
building?
been such a like actualization, like perfect full circle kind of connection.
It would have been amazing, and if as far as dreaming goes, if you can't, if buying a building in Hemet is too big of a dream, we got to look at that. It seemed possible. And very, very sadly, that building was actually torn down a couple months ago. Kind of seemingly, I mean, I don't want to say without warning, because it's like, am I paying attention to what buildings get bought and torn down in Hemet every week? No, but it felt like it came out of nowhere. And it
It's
was
like
just,
a reverse blue car syndrome, right? Like we're aware of the building all of a sudden so much more. And then
yes,
suddenly now something happens when 10 years
exactly.
nothing was happening to
Exactly.
it.
Our eye is on it. The first draft of our website was like, our mission. We want to buy Gary's TV. And I
Yeah.
swear that was on the website. Like when we first launched the festival, and then it gets torn down. It's like, different dream.
We want the spirit of Gary's video to stay on in us.
So what you are looking at behind us is as close to we could get of buying Gary's TV and video. We actually commissioned George Sportelli, the original artist of the Gary's TV and video mural, to basically recreate the mural that he had made, but on a canvas. So what you're looking at behind us is a photograph of this canvas. It is yay big. I don't know, like 2 feet wide. For those of you listening,
This much.
yeah. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And he painted it for the festival, and so we are going to use it for various promotional things. We are in the process of getting a giant backdrop made of it so people can take photos in front of it at the festival itself. So It's just a really special project. It took months of coordinating with George to figure it out and figure out the right design and the right way to do it. And he just wanted to maintain the integrity, the original integrity of the artwork. And it is beautiful. And he's even added some other characters onto it that were not originally in the mural. So it's somewhat remastered, you might
So
say.
I do distinctly remember there being a brief period when there was a like I don't know if he had revamped it or added some characters
That is
when it
true.
was still at Gary's video. Like I remember for those of us those listening, I guess we could kind of walk through some of the characters. There's James Dean, um,
Clint Eastwood.
Rocky Balboa, that was
Yeah.
always on there if I remember.
Yes, that was
Axel
always Rocky.
Foley was on there.
That's an
Uh,
addition, actually.
is it okay? Because
Yeah.
I remember Eastwood and Marilyn Monroe
Yeah.
were
And
always
James Dean.
there.
And but the see what you can tell is it twisting my head. That's a dead giveaway. Is Marv from Sin City?
Yeah, Marv was definitely like a
That's
much later
that's
addition.
a little after a certain era of remaking here, and Heath Ledger Joker and Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow. So anyway, these are just a lot of characters that George loves, and these are from movies he really likes and characters he likes. So these are, his taste up on the canvas.
I love that we got it though. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. So elephant in the room. And so getting into that a little bit, this is coming out on Friday, November 10th, and that is actually the very first day of the festival. And we are having an opening night party at the Historic Hemet Theater. And this is for anybody who has an all access badge to the pass. So filmmakers who got into the festival, they have 2 free badges. And then anyone who buys a pass online for $20 is just can come into that and then see all the movies the next day. So the opening night's really just an opportunity for like filmmakers and people to hang out because Saturday is going to be intense.
Yeah, Saturday is going to be a robust day.
Bring your butt cushion.
I didn't know where that was going to land. There was a buildup, and I'm like, I don't know what's coming.
Yeah. But what's great is, basically we wanted to have an opportunity for everyone to hang out and talk in the theater and just see the space and get to know each other. There's going to be a looping video that has some like video of all the movies that are playing, so you get a little bit of a preview of what's going to be showing tomorrow. And yeah, just because, we're going to be watching movies the next day, there's going to be time to hang out. Definitely like feel free to come in and out because it's such a long day. It's like you want to catch this block or that block, go get something to eat. There will be a gap between 5 and 6:30 for people to have dinner and go do other things. And, then we'll be back at 6:30. So Gabe, do you want to go through maybe the programs and
Yeah.
how things are broken up?
So we're starting off with documentary as the first block. That'll be 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Looking forward to that one.
Now, what's a
Then,
documentary?
well,
So I'm
how
new.
would you define it, Daniel, since you have one in this one?
I worked on one in
Yeah,
it.
you worked on one that's in here.
Yeah. Oh, so I get to answer my own question.
Yeah, I'm throwing it back at you.
That's
I'm
very.
doing a no but, as they call it in,
You're
in
being
improv.
you're being a good teacher right now. Um, Basically, you know what a documentary is. Okay, what's the next block?
Was that you passing it off? Well played, sir. So after that, and it should go to say that we're having Q&As at the end of each block, right?
Yes,
With some
and
of the filmmakers.
there are filmmakers coming for every block. So
Yes,
every block that we have, there are filmmakers in attendance for them, which
absolutely.
is very fun. And some are like everybody's there. So I don't know what we're gonna do. We're gonna have to just popcorn.
Yeah, it'll be super fun. So from 1:30 to 2:30, we'll have narrative shorts. Now,
Yeah.
do you want me to answer this one, Daniel? Because I don't know if I have the perfect answer.
Well, these are I'd say these are beefy shorts.
Yes.
Yes, they are substantial pieces of work, and they are incredibly well made. They're really great stories, and a lot of the stories are about just bigger issues. Like they're just really impactful, well-made, hard-hitting movies.
Yeah.
And
I
those,
feel like any of them could just be called like emotional shorts. Like every one of them
yeah,
has a really good hook and a center to them, which is why they became selection for us.
yeah, and they're really well acted. And yeah, I mean, we were just like thrilled with everything that got submitted. Like we got so many movies. I think it surprised all of us, like how many submissions we ended up getting.
I would say too that when we were going through the process, just to kind of insider baseball of looking at all the submissions, what really surprised us was just how good basically almost all of them really were. And it really came down to like anyone who didn't get selected, it's nothing as a slight to you or as though we felt like you did poorly or it was a bad movie or anything. It was just what fits what we can kind of do and what helps carry the message through as best as possible. And like I was just so impressed by everything we got. And it was one of those things where every time I watched a new submission, I'm like, this legitimizes us as a film festival. And then I'd watch another one, I'm like, this legitimizes us as a film festival.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, it's like, I mean, but it's true. It's like the quality of what's playing is a reflection of, the event itself. And yeah. And it was frankly, it was just so hard to
Yeah.
make everything fit in these blocks. Like it was hard. And some things are even in some things categorized as two things. I mean, like most of the movies are from Southern California.
Yeah.
So it's like we can't put them all in one. So we just had to do our best to place them. And yeah,
I was almost glad that so many of the films were kind of sat in a couple buckets because it did make some of those switcheroos like doable.
yes.
Like I was
Yeah,
like, oh
totally.
man, it would have been really rough if we're like, no, they only submitted to this one. That's the only one they can go in.
Yeah, yeah. Like yeah, anyway, there's this movie Infinite Friction that's playing. That is a really fun adventure short film that was actually made in San Jacinto. And there is a ton of really cool 3D animation in it. And so while that could have fallen in the Made in Hemet category, the Southern California filmmaker category, it's in the animation experimental category, because it is like so well suited to match all those other movies. Like
Yeah, it's a perfect
with
blend.
all the other movies in there is like that is a awesome that I'm really excited about that block.
Yeah.
There were
Which is
all
a good dovetail for us because that is the block that
that's what you're
follows narrative
talking about.
shorts.
Yeah.
And that'll be the 3 p.m. to 3:40 p.m. block.
Yeah.
Like Daniel said, that's going to be a fun one for everyone. We've got things that are like music animation shorts. We've got
Yeah.
the um, Mushroom will be in there from Steven, who's one of the co-founders. Like a lot of really interesting and I don't know how you describe it. Like because of the experimental, it's such a great ginger in your sushi kind of moment for the
Yeah.
film festival day. Like it's just a palate cleanse.
Yes.
It kind of helps you differentiate and then be like, all right, what's the next block going to be now? Like
Yeah.
I'm just my palate's ready to go.
Yes. I ginger in your sushi, baby. That's what we should just call that block from the I'm like, you're in the ginger in your sushi block. What is
they're
that?
they're like, oh, I totally understand immediately.
Oh, what you mean? Yeah. The grand jury award for best ginger in your sushi goes. Yeah.
Well, I know what's going on next year for my hard pitches. So the following block to that one at
Oh, I just want
4:10
to say one other thing
yes, go
about
ahead.
that block. Uh, there is a Hemet-born artist named Michael Haight
Yes.
who has a film playing in that block, and he is actually going to do live piano scoring to his silent film.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah. Yes.
I didn't even know this. See, I'm learning things as well, audience. This
Yes.
is great.
You know?
So yes, after that block, we will at 4:10 to 5 p.m. be doing the Southern California filmmakers. Now, as Daniel mentioned, this is the one that so many of them could have sat in because, a lot of them came from that area.
Hmm.
But how would you describe kind of what we landed on with this one, Daniel? I think we really wanted to find ones that showcased the area and to a certain degree. Would you say that's kind of how
Absolutely.
it sat?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I mean, in all of these movies, Southern California actually is a texture in them as
Yes.
far as like the exteriors, how things look. And it's also a little bit more region. It's a little bit more Inland Empire that
Yeah.
block.
Yeah.
There are some people from LA in it, but the content of their movies matched well with the other ones that were a little more like Inland Empire centric. Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's basically their palette kind of included the Inland Empire and SoCal area
Mhm.
as part of the film, rather than just being people from the area who made a film.
Yeah, yeah, or the
Yeah,
attitude, or yeah,
yeah, just
it's
the whole vibe.
yeah,
And then it looks like that'll be when we have the break because we'll have a little bit of a pause there, a chance to grab some food in the local area, kind of see Hemet a bit. We're going to come back at 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. for the student showcase. Now, this is one that, as we get into the rest of the podcast, I'll be really kind of excitedly talking about because my job is working with students as an educator. And this was what originally attached me so strongly to the Hemet Film Festival was the idea of going forward and as we grow, how we can connect students and how we can get them involved in this sort of thing. And especially I see it in my work. I do college and career readiness. So we're looking at the idea that, like, yes, college is definitely an option for a lot of people, but there's also skill sets and these other abilities that you can develop that could be a successful career for you, and let college be maybe a further down the line conversation. And a lot of my students have that artistic vibe of wanting to do something, wanting to express themselves, especially in audio and visual. And so I'm like, this is just, it's amazing to see so many things in this block.
yeah, yeah. It's really cool. And shout out to Takowitz High School
I can see that. Yeah.
and San Jacinto High School. So they each have about five movies playing in the festival itself, and then someone from Mount San Jacinto, someone from San Jacinto Valley Academy. So it's this part of it. I know from the very beginning, Gabe, you and I were like, this is the whole point of doing this
Yes.
festival is to have a premiere time, a Saturday night, 6:30, uh, going to the movies as a student to see your movie play and for your friends and your family to come and see that and just be in that. We've talked about it and it's so exciting. And gosh, I just it's so funny. It's like I want that experience for them. I want them to be so, but it's
Yeah.
like it's their lives and their movies, and we're just creating the opportunity for it to happen.
Well,
And
it's such a magical feeling for them to have people see their film that I would honestly say anyone who has a pass, like an all-day pass, or has the time for that block, it's not going to be missed for you to go in there and just watch and appreciate these
yeah,
films for all those people. Like, you have no idea how much that will mean to every one of these people to have like other people they don't know or aren't necessarily
yeah,
family seeing and being able to enjoy or just
absolutely.
aware of their film.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. I mean, like every filmmaker that I'm talking to about coming, it's like the student block is the most important
Yeah,
block, the whole thing.
yeah,
It's like your
absolutely.
movie's cool, your movie's great, but the student block is the most important.
So yeah, I think that'll be an absolutely just wonderful one. And then to close out the night, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. is how we have it scheduled, but I think it might bleed a little long. We're looking at,
Of course.
yeah, which I kind of think will be fun. It's the
Yeah.
until we're ready, but that'll be the Maid and Hemet block.
Yes.
Which, I mean, how else can he close the night but the Maid and Hemet block, right?
Yeah. And it's actually amazing that an entire group of movies are made by Hemet people,
I know that's the
and it's
coolest
the
thing.
longest.
Yeah,
That's crazy. I was not expecting that.
yeah, that'll be a lot of fun, and so that's the program that we're looking at for Saturday. Like as you said, that is a robust and enriching Saturday right
Yes,
there.
it's crazy. And so I hope yeah, I mean I hope just come as much as you can and look for things that might be of interest to you. Definitely let students know, bring students. We really worked hard to make the programming PG-13. There is some language, of course. It's an independent film festival. Of course, people are going to be saying bad words, like please. But we really
Yeah,
worked hard to curate it so that way, that it's essentially PG-13. Like think of it that
yeah,
way.
yeah. I would
Playing,
say we
some adult content and situations, but you know,
Yeah, and it's not even like the PG from the 80s where you're like Ghostbusters is a PG. It's still like PG-13 in a pretty couched way. So
Salacious things in Ghostbusters.
yeah, I mean, there were a lot of movies that had the wow, this was PG.
Wow.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was one film particularly. I can't remember if it was one of the slasher films like Friday the 13th or something, but there was a particular film that like that's why the parental guidance stuff had to get like we need to make a PG-13. Like we
I
need to
think
make a middle ground.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
It was Raiders. Okay, thank you. Yes, I was like, it's something very like famous that I'm just
Yeah.
not in my brain at the moment.
Movie mythology.
Well, there was when you did a junior, I remember you did the story about like Platoon. I think no, Apocalypse Now. You did the story about like yeah, to give the director a heart attack.
Oh yeah, well the lead actor had a heart
The
attack.
lead, yeah, you're doing that like sort of sharing that story. And for me, I love that because you were sharing the story, you're working the crowd, it's great. And I leaned over to a friend of mine's wife, and you had said Apocalypse Now, and then I somehow didn't hear the rest of the story. And I leaned over and I was like, "Isn't that the movie where one of the guys got a heart attack?" And she goes, "Yes, the lead actor,
Yeah.
as he just said."
Awesome.
I was like, oh, "Yeah, that makes
Oh.
sense."
Oh yeah. That's funny. So yeah, that's our program, and yeah, I mean, kind of transitioning, talking about the importance of the student showcase, how awesome it is, how many movies we have. Yeah, I'm wondering, this is the Gabriel Diaz episode.
Man, I don't know if I have enough self confidence to have an episode solely to myself.
Too late.
It's here now and it's
Too
happening.
late.
Deal with it.
This is happening. But I do wonder about transitioning, going back to what you said about just describing like the work you do and
Yeah.
just yeah, please.
So I'll give you the quick long version of it, if you will. Started off early doing volunteer work at the Hemet Library because it's Hemet. Why? Like, of course, I've got to have the connections there, right? And because of that, I worked a lot of other random jobs periodically, but I always sort of ended up falling back into positions at the Hemet Library. I got laid off there 3 different times because of different financial crises for the city,
Oh my
and
God.
still came back to work there again when they had like a new position.
Like we figured it out.
Yeah. And so I worked there. I worked at the Marietta Library, the Carlsbad Library, the Escondido Library, and on and off 15 or so years working in the library field and started getting into the technology field, a part of it where you're doing like maker spaces and teaching people how to like use their technology they have. And
And
that's kind of how I ended up getting into the educating people about different technologies.
yeah, and that could be like anyone just walking into the library and you have various equipment there, like 3D printers or computers people can use, and
It'd
you're
be
like,
VR, laser cutters, whatever thing was possible for us to get off of a grant. And it was cradle to grave. Any age could be in there. And in some ways, that was one of my favorite things was I share a story a lot of teaching people how to use Tinkercad, which is a computer assisted design, and it's how you can model 3D prints. And I had groups of people that were 5 years old to people that were 85 years old. And it was fascinating. Like, how do you work with such a different, like wide age gap? How do you teach them the same thing at the same time? And for me, that was developing skills of like, okay, how do I code switch? How do I talk to both these people at the same time, but make sure they're both getting information that helps them get the project done in the hour we might have?
interesting. Yeah, so then how did that lead you to where you are now? You said like that
So
was like the exposure to getting that skill set, and you're becoming like a jack of all trades and just learning all these different, it's like whatever new piece of equipment comes in, it's like, all right, Gabe, like teach.
I mean, you called it. That's basically what it was. It's a lot of people can attest to this, but most jobs have that various tasks as assigned part of it. And that was me. That was the, hey, we got this new piece of equipment. No one has time or the understanding of how to work it. Can you learn it? Okay, I'll spend time. I'll read the manual, I'll figure it out. And like you said, it was the jack of all trades pickup. I started kind of not being a specialist, but understanding a little bit of everything and not much of anything. And that allowed me to figure those questions out. And I think what helped was directionality. Because I was leaning in this tech world, my focus was I was in the library field, but it wasn't just sort of books and the expected job that you would do in a library. It was, okay, what am I looking at for tech that people might need to know about or gets them prepared for the future. It's allowing me to look at this, what's the next step? And then, like a lot of people, when the pandemic hit, the job was no longer there. And I was looking for a while and got really lucky that the San Diego County Office of Education came out to me and were talking to me about a makerspace they were setting up. And I thought it was just a like, hey, we want your expertise because you've gone to some of these other meetings. We know of you kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then he was talking to the Al Love, who was the senior director there, and he goes, all right, so anyways, it starts in May. Are you up for it? I was like, didn't realize we were having an interview, but yes, question mark, what's happening? And so I just went along with it. And they were like, here's a place where we want you to put together a makerspace and a STEAM lab and teach students in underserved communities how to use technology that's going to be needed for their jobs when they get to the career sector that they have no ability to interact with now. And without getting too in the weeds on it, I think the biggest part of it was we looked at what was called the equity blueprint. And it was kind of a flip of like the idea of trickle down economics as opposed to like, okay, the rich get the best things and eventually it'll come down to everyone else. It was, let's target students that are historically underserved and expect that the other schools and the other cities that have a lot of money are going to catch up to that anyways.
Mm.
So instead, we're going to go to JCCS schools, which stands for Juvenile Court and Community Services schools that don't have access to these things. And we're going to teach them how to make a robot and how to code and how to, laser cut, and how to make and craft stuff. And long story, kind of try to abbreviate it out. It led to me teaching podcasting, which is kind of the full circle of doing podcasting now for the film festival.
Wow. So, yeah, but the idea of that, like you said, is these are schools that do not have this stuff as part of their curriculum. And so it's like to create a space and it's free?
Absolutely. Yeah. Every school in the San Diego County system is covered by us, basically 42 schools or 42 districts.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that's working with a lot of different types of students.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, it's the code switching thing. It's something that I never would have thought of a skill that I developed would be just being able to interact with a large swath of people and kind of quickly communicate with them as being something that would be so well developed. But it's something I do every day and kind of really enjoy with my students is we have all these students from different backgrounds coming in and just figuring out like, all right, I have 3 or 4 hours with them. How do I make a quick rapport so that they understand and can appreciate what I'm teaching them, but also establish with them that I'm not here as an admin or a teacher with a grading system on them. I'm just like, I just want to teach you something really cool because it could lead to you having success in your life. That's all I need to do.
Yeah.
And like just trying to establish and understand that rapport with them is really fascinating. An example I always like to
Trust
give.
you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, an example I always give to the students is you've probably done an essay for class by the time I have you. We usually get you in like middle school or high school or the ages I'm working with predominantly. You've probably done an essay for class, right? You've written something for a teacher that you're hoping the teacher will like because that will give you the grade you need to get like an A on it, right? You're writing something for what that teacher's sensibility is probably, whether you realize it or not. And when we get into a podcasting class, I'm like, hey, you get to do a podcast about something you like. You want to talk about true crime? You want to talk about aliens? You want to talk about food? You want to talk about sports? It's something you like. Now the only audience that you're putting it out for is would you listen to it? And there's such an amazing like switch that happens in their brain of I'm not doing a thing that's school based. I'm doing something at school that can be me based. And I love that. They come up with the craziest stuff. I have students who are completely disengaged suddenly start having a podcast where they've recorded 30 minutes and they're still going and they're ready to do their next episode. And they're asking how they can change like the sounds or make edits or how do I add music to this? And it's just such a like, I hate the idea that it's like I'm making an impact, but it's hard not to look at it and be like, they're getting something from this.
Oh my God. Yeah, of course they are. Yeah. I mean, you want to be humble, but it's like, yeah, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And it's like teaching so many different types of skills. But I think a really crazy one is like how to talk.
Absolutely.
And
That's yeah, it's like, I love it too, because we always do partners. So we kind of do like you and I are set up, right? Where we're kind of co-hosting / interviewees with each other.
Yeah.
And teaching the students like, okay, if you're doing an interview, you know what's not interesting? Hey, what's your favorite color? Blue. Okay. Next question. just no one cares. But if you're like, all right, why is blue your favorite color? Give me a little more
There
context.
you
Like,
go.
when did
Yeah.
you develop it? Like, teaching them the ability of how do you draw out a conversation more and more for what you're trying to get is such a cool like process. And seeing them kind of like, all right, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And um, you've experienced this, we've all experienced this when we were younger, but I love what a student has to hear themselves on audio for the first time. There's something super fun about every time they're like, that's what I sound like. Oh, this is terrible.
Especially as you're like a teenager.
Oh
That's
yeah.
kind of terrible.
But it's fun because then I can segue into talking to them about like the bones in the inner ear and stuff. And you kind of just, that's why it's happening. And they're like, I didn't know that. Now I have new information. All
You're
right, moving
describing
on.
how your ears work.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's the thing is when you're with the students, the worst thing is if they ask you a question and you just go like, I don't know, or like, that's not relevant to what we're learning.
Hmm.
Instead, it's just like, if I have the answer, I'm going to tell you. And if I don't, I'm like, let me look that up for you. And like, let's find that out together.
Wow.
Because a makerspace, a STEAM lab, a CTE environment needs to be collaborative.
Hmm.
So to like tie everything back, it's the same push that we're having for the film festival is we want this sort of collaborative network approach. It's not a monolithic like we got these films, these are the best films, everyone loves them, we gave awards and we're done. It's no, we want to find people that have a passion that clearly stands out to us because they're going to want to meet people who have a passion. It's the same reason we have this interactive like networking party on Friday. It's we want these people to be aware of everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And be able to talk to each other and work with each other and just create a space for people to make movies year after year after year. It's like you want to create the ongoing relationship with everyone submitting stuff. And for
Absolutely.
the students too, it's like wanting this, if like someone's a junior this year, and then they know this is happening next year and you know, all that stuff.
I'd say too, something that really stood out to me, and I think anyone listening who's listened to the other episodes, a lot of conversations came up about Jimbo Marshall,
Hmm.
who was this teacher for you that helped you find your kind of, I don't want to say find your passion, but refine your
Yep,
passion
definitely.
for
Help me
films,
find it. Yeah,
But
help me.
he also was a mentor to you. And like he stepped in with Wesley and Steven, and everyone had this network through him that you can see a clear line that kind of helped where you guys all sort of continued out to. And that's something that I really feel like the film festival can just facilitate by simply existing,
Hmm.
is people finding those connections and potentially those mentors or mentees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't tell you, but a English teacher from West Valley just submitted a movie, and it's like gonna play in the closing block now.
I did see the email on that. Yeah,
Yeah,
because you're like,
so
oh man, we're full on blocks. And he's like, it's only this long. And you're like, we can find a spot then.
you should have said that first. But
Start with that. We can see what we can fit you in.
I mean, it's just a reality. But I'm so excited. That's like just someone reaching out. Someone just found it organically. He's like, I found this like 3 days after the deadline. Can you consider me? And that's just gonna keep happening. It's like really trippy to even just be checking. This is getting so we're just having a meeting now. Okay, we're just having, um, but it's really trippy to check the Instagram followers and like it's just growing every day. Like it's
Absolutely.
wow. Yeah, it's really fun.
And that's the thing is it's as organic for us as it is for everyone else involved.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think if
Yeah.
anything, I'm hoping these podcasts serve as a way to kind of peel back any veneer that would normally be developed in this kind of environment and let us be like, we're there with you. Like
Yeah, we're figuring it
we're
out.
in the trenches with you guys. We're trying to figure this stuff out too. And we want to be open and connected.
Yeah, and just have the best event possible. And if yeah, in that sense, if there's any like feedback or hey, what can this be like different next year? Blah blah blah. To fuck, talk to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why I'm hoping that eventually we'll have a lot of the different filmmakers on here. I'd love to talk to them and chat and just sort of.
Yeah.
You did something. I we'll get insider baseball on this because, like you said, we're kind of having a meeting, but I still think it's worth talking to our audience about. Is you specifically also offered feedback and kind of rationale as to why maybe a film wasn't selected, which is not the common.
Well, it's an experiment. I mean,
Yeah,
and then so it's like, yeah, just getting back to people and like just trying to be real with people about some people were really disappointed that certain things didn't get in. And rightfully so, especially if like you're from the area or around the area or there's all kinds of reasons why we could only fit so many movies. And it's a ton.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, so yeah, versus like, we're not trying to like get little gatekeepers or anything. It's like
No.
we just really want the best, for the community. Because I think that is something that's like really important for doing this. It's like also it's like an opportunity for filmmakers to show their stuff and meet each other, but like we really stand by what's showing. Like
Yes.
if you come to the film festival and watch some stuff, like if you watch a block of movies, like there's going to be something for you in
Yeah.
each block. Yeah. There's like really interesting stuff playing with like a lot of heart and a lot of stuff that's like very creative and scrappy, and yeah, and there's stuff that's really polished, and it's all over the place.
I think in some ways that's maybe the like happy accident of us having to do such rearranging with the programming is it did sort of create an environment where every block just has such versatility to it.
Mhm.
Like it's kind of a happy accident.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really, and you have no clue. I mean, like the student thing was a real like. At first, it felt like a failure because we didn't get that many. Like we did definitely did enough to fill an hour. And then Talkwitz High School was like, oh, we have all of these projects going right now, and you're like, that's insane. So it's
Go on.
like I haven't done the math yet, but I think it'll be like exactly an hour. You know,
That's awesome.
yeah, maybe a little under, probably under, but that's still cool. Yeah, so I guess in talking about podcasting, but that is like your focus now. Is that the kind of the only thing or or predominantly that you're teaching?
No, I teach, like I said, it's the Makerspace and CTE Career Lab. So to try and describe it kind of succinctly, the Linda Vista Linda Vista Labs, as they're called in for the county office, we have an upstairs division that has design thinking, ICT, engineering lab, and then my middle school STEAM lab, which is kind of more all ages. And that means that I'm teaching robotics, coding, things like how to use a Cricut to make entrepreneurships, how to use a laser cutter. We have a filament recycler, which is a really big deal for me because 3D printing, and I'll teach a class now for us because I've been doing this all day. But when you 3D print something predominantly in a library or school environment, you're going to use what's called PLA, stands for polylactic acid. It's a corn oil or sugarcane based polymer, i.e., instead of petrol oil that you would normally see, fossil fuel based plastics, you're using something that's way less toxic. But it's still a microplastic when you have waste product. And if a print fails or you just have things that you have to break off of a print, that stuff just gets tossed in recycling or sometimes a trash and just ends up being waste. So a big part of my lab was looking at the idea of like the UN sustainability goals and how do we reduce, reuse, or recycle. So I made sure that when I got the lab and got funding for it, one of the big items we got was a Filabot filament recycler. This will actually grind up old filament, heat it through a new nozzle, cool it on a plate, and then re-spool it so that we can have filament reused from old leftover scraps.
Oh
So
my
we
God.
teach students that as well. We do rapid prototyping. We do 3D scan. We do some of the makey-makeys, which is like basic coding to make little video games. Just kind of whatever we can find. And the podcasting one was great because it's one that we have that's we do a lot as a class. And I also have like an advanced or intermediate and advanced level that I want to break into where we have some pile mixers and then also some Tascam remixers. So we can get students on like the kind of second and third tiers of like audio editing, some with a DAW and some without a DAW.
Hmm. Digital audio
Yeah,
workspace.
I probably should have explained that part. Gotta get the vocabulary in there, man. It's the pedagogy, it's the defining the rules.
Pedagogy is like one of the best words ever, by the way. I know you
It's great, but it gets heard so much in the school system. I'm sure if there's any teachers listening, they've heard pedagogy so much.
but then I mean, do you find that podcasting is like a passion? It's like maybe what you're most passionate about amongst all those things, or
This was definitely so, I think the best thing for this podcast is to be as honest as possible with people. For me, there was a long period of time where I felt like I was an artistically minded person with no canvas. I tried my hand at things like guitar or painting or poetry or anything that every teenager's tried to put themselves through and never found any success. It just nothing ever clicked as like, this is my thing. This is what I feel passionate about in the same way that like you had with film. And the closest I've had is kind of more recently is this podcast of, wow, there's something here that just feels incredibly empowering to put your voice out there in a very genuine kind of way and hope that you're going to find an audience. It's that if you build it, they will come kind of thing. And yes, it's become a passion for me, but I think I'm also rewarded by the fact that it's something I get to teach a lot because we find that whenever we ask students, like, hey, what do you want? Like, what do you wish you could get more of at school? Almost universally, most students are like, I don't feel like I'm being heard.
Hmm.
People aren't listening to me. They're not hearing what I want. They're telling me what they think is the best idea. There's a lot of ivory tower things that'll happen in the school environment. So the best way I can be like, well, if you want a voice, here's a mic.
Wow.
Let me tell you how to put it in the world. Let me tell you how you can make money right now if you want to, putting it on the internet. Let me tell you about an ad read. Let me tell you about an RSS feed. Like suddenly there's not only is this a passion where I feel like every day I'm getting to cut my teeth and learn more about it, but I'm also getting to share it with people
Mhm.
is I totally understand now what it's like to have your first film screened to people that, like friends and family. It's that same feeling of like, there's something here.
Wow. Yeah. And just giving people that opportunity to, because everybody has a story and like everybody has an interesting story. And it's a unique story that's unique to them. And just being able to embrace that, talk through that, figure out how to share that, how to make that shareable, because that is a big part of connecting as human beings is like knowing how to share your story with
Yeah.
people and receiving other people's too.
It's kind of the active listening, sort of like active speaking. It's that understanding that mix. I mean, I'll say too, it's amazing every time how surprised I am by what students will come up with.
Mhm.
We'll give them this short period of time to kind of script out and plot and figure out what they want to do for their podcast. And I've had students come up with crazy, like, I want to do a true crime podcast. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's like a pretty common thing. And then they go through and they record it, and they record it from like a murder that happened in the 80s in their town that they for some reason know about. And I'm like, all right, that's kind of interesting that you have that knowledge base. And then at the end, they're like, hey, can you show us how to do like a reverb effect on the sound? And I'm like, yeah, I can show you that in Audacity, which is a free option for you guys so people can try it out. They go through it and they're like, would you like to listen? I'm like, yeah. And then the podcast ends with them having been the victims of the crime was the big twist on their podcast.
Really?
Like they did a reverb effect to make them sound kind of ethereal.
Wow.
And I was like, that's
Like that's so
you're
creative.
you're 13. Like that's amazing that that's where your brain went and you had this commitment and you figured out from not really knowing anything about this to getting that done to meet the goals you had just like set for yourself.
Yeah. And using the technology to enhance your story.
Mm-hmm. And also to what you were saying about everyone having a story, what I think is really important about this is that every student I work with, I try to emphasize that like be unique, be yourself because that is unique. If you speak another language, if you have a different cultural background than most people would expect from a podcast person, share that. There's a niche for people that are a Spanish only speaking podcast about anime. That's that's a niche of people want to
Totally.
listen to that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and it's having them and understanding that you can do that. Like we had a great podcast where two students just compared similar foods from their different cultural backgrounds. It was an Ecuadorian and a Vietnamese girl. And they were comparing like, oh, well, I love like dumplings and I love empanadas. Like they're kind of the same, but they're kind of different. Let's talk about that. And it
Wow.
was like, what a cool way to come to a cultural understanding from left field.
Yeah. And through a show and
Yeah.
doing it like in an entertaining way and learning those things yeah, it's like a really engaged. I don't know, it's like something about like record goes on and go. There's it's an important, interesting skill and like and it's beautiful. That's so beautiful. And then
Well,
so for yourself, it's like teaching it. But then, I think why you and I became friends and why we are still friends is because we both love to talk endlessly and can talk about whatever and just keep going and going. And those are my earliest memories with you.
Yes.
It's just talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. It's like so funny how like, oh yeah, that's how we communicate is verbally. Yeah.
Well, I remember too was there was probably you were the first person I met who I felt like I wasn't worried I was just talking at.
Mm,
You know, like we were talking and we were both communicating and we were both incredibly verbose as we did it. But it was like, it was such a like, okay, you tag up on that thing. Oh, I'm going to tag up on that thing. It was the yes and improv unintentionally by just the way that our brains worked. And
yeah.
there were many times when we first started hanging out where it'd be like, you know, finally like, hey, Dan's mom let me spend the night at his house, and then we end up just talking until we can't talk and fall asleep.
Yeah. It's like 4 a.m.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, and it's to the point where sentences are skipping past each other because we're no longer like connecting points.
Yeah. So when you're like, let's do a podcast, I go, we've been doing that since we were 12 years old.
Oh, we're just going to add a mic to it. Cool, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And but yeah, so it makes me wonder if, kind of that same thing of knowing yourself, knowing your story, knowing that about yourself. I mean, does that draw you to it as well?
I think absolutely. I think it's a really interesting environment because I'm not one to be on like social media in a lot of ways. I often worry that I'm like, what do I have to say that other people need to hear? But I've found that with the podcast, and I think maybe in some ways why I really love the idea of doing this as an interview and connecting with all these filmmakers and hopefully having them on and talking with them is the idea that maybe it's not so much about what I have to say as it is about how I can amplify what others have to share.
Mm.
You know, for as highfalutinous as that might sound, it's just the idea that it's something I've taken to me in teaching now is that I want to be impactful without being important.
Mm.
You know, and it's the idea of like there's so many things out there that how do I just amplify those options? How do I share stories that otherwise wouldn't get heard?
Yeah, and that's deeply satisfying to
Yeah.
like be of service that way. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess your answer is a little bit like yes, yes, Daniel, I do love to talk, but it's more important to me that maybe it's like getting other people's voices out and that sort of thing.
I guess I do love to talk, yes, but I guess I love talking when it serves a purpose to some degree, you know, like, and I feel like maybe there's a chance here for me to serve a purpose
Mhm.
that would be really rewarding, not just to myself, but
Yeah.
also to other people and to listeners. And that's what has me excited. You know, if I sit there and I'm just like, I don't need to share what I ate for breakfast, that doesn't feel important per se. But if I can share, man, there's a feeling I got from watching someone's film or from the process they took to get there or what their film meant to them. A great example would be it would have been the film that was just up, but our other co-founders, one of our other co-founders, Steven Siemens, his Mushroom, Frisky's Adventure, like watching through that and the feeling of, wow, I took something from watching that. It's like, okay, I want to share with someone what that means. Like I had to start texting Steven to be like, hey man, I watched this thing. Can I talk to you about this for a bit? Because like I have your number now, so now I just want to bother you about it.
Yeah.
You know, like self-servingly, what's going to happen is hopefully as we get filmmakers on this podcast and be like, hey, I watched this thing. I had some questions and I just like really want to talk to you about it. Is that cool? Like that
Yeah,
might be what the podcast becomes.
that would be awesome. So, Gabe, I want to go back to something you had talked about feeling like an artistic person, but not feeling like you had a canvas per se,
Yeah.
and maybe like trying different things out. And I think that was also a connection that we had from a very early age was just feeling very creative and just
Yeah.
wanting to do stuff together. And even from a very early on, I always wanted you to act in the movies that I was making. And we talked a little bit about The Neighborhood Mafia, which was like the epic movie I wanted to make. I wanted you to play this guy named Mr. Puff.
Yeah, Mr. Puff.
Was one of the crime bosses, one of the three families, the I don't even remember what they were called, the cul-de-sac kids, the suburbs.
Yeah, there was like the suburbs, the cul-de-sac kids. It was something like that. It's really funny because to anyone who's seen it, the movie Brick, it basically felt like that ate our breakfast. Like we're like, oh man, this is a better version of what we were trying to do.
That's a different project. I think you're jumping ahead in time a
I
little
mean,
bit.
yes, Revolver is very similar too, but I rewatched Brick kind of recently, and I was like, man, there's
Uh,
a lot of Neighborhood Mafia 2
oh, interesting.
vibes with
It was
this.
it was always just in the air.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was jumping the gun. Sorry, a little bit. And then but that movie never, of course, happened because
yeah.
it was too epic.
But in fairness, just to kind of converse on that though, there was some stuff I learned about film in just messing around doing shots with that. Because we filmed
Yeah,
some things with your cousin,
we
and
did a
trying to
test
film with like
shoot.
a boom pole and realizing
Yeah,
that like we're getting terrible shadows because the ceiling fan is on and it's like shaking the light that of the kitchen.
right.
Um, realize like I think it's the first time I learned about if you film a CRT like computer screen, you just have this rolling line that you can't
Right.
see the whole time. Like just random stuff like that that you're like still stick with me today when I film stuff.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Just learning by doing. It's like, I mean, that's exactly it. It's like you watch a movie, you write a movie, you imagine a movie in your head because that's what you do. And then it's like, well, how do you make that? And you're like, no clue. And you just like set up a camera and see what happens.
But yeah,
Uh,
you were always very good about involving me in the process, which was something Steven had talked to as well. And Wes was the idea that I think it's bled into your skill as a director too, is you're very trusting of people and allowing them to kind of have flexibility to learn and understand things in the process as well. And that was like how I was able to be in some of the other films that you started working on. Like as we got into high school age, it was like, it'd be things like, hey, can you help out with this? Or can you be a background character here? Can you respond to this person's acting to a certain spot? Like there's a lot of those being like the Walt Flanagan from the like View Askew universe stuff where you're like, just go be that guy. Just go be that guy now. Put on a beanie now.
yeah. Right. Yeah. And there was this pretty fun big project we were working on in high school where every summer they had a film that was made through West Valley High School. It was a summer project. It was directed by Stacy Bailey, the teacher, and it was usually written by another teacher as well. And I was getting really into film and had written a couple features already. And I asked the teacher, like, could I try writing something to make for the summer project? And she was like, by all means, like, definitely, like, work on something. And you and I just I just remember feeling inseparable
Yeah.
during that time. And we were just writing this script that was this like high school film noir detective story called Revolver. And the whole idea was to actually write this movie as a Gabriel Diaz vehicle. It would be something that you would act in,
Yeah.
and something that we were writing together that you would act in. And we worked on this script for a really long time. And so, yes, you mentioned the movie Brick. And very shortly after we had written it, our story was about like a high school detective, and this girl goes missing. Oh, that sounds like Brick. That's the plot of Brick. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
And so that came out like a year later. And then there was a very other funny coincidence that happened around a movie that came out around that time that had also borrowed our idea. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
No, which one?
Okay. So in this script, also, what you should know is Gabe is probably like, he's such an important person in my life for many reasons, but the biggest is maybe this might be the biggest. You showed me the Beatles.
Well, yeah, that was our big connection point for a long time.
Gabe showed me the Beatles. I was like really into classic rock and I thought I knew stuff. And like, my dad had a Beatles record, but like he wasn't a huge Beatles fan. So I absorbed all my dad's record collection and I was like, I know classic rock. I know the 60s and 70s. And then Gabe's like, well, let's listen to Rubber Soul and let's listen to Sergeant Pepper and Revolver and Magical Mystery Tour. I feel like we listen to that one the most.
Oh yeah.
And just all those LSD Beatles albums. Let's just call it what they are.
Yeah, let's be fair here.
Yeah. And that became, an obsession for both of us.
Yeah.
And something we really connected on. And so in our script, we named every character and place, uh, every whatever name was a Beatles reference. So every single
Yeah, it
character,
was like, and it was like Sergeant Pepper High School. Like,
something
or it
like
was like, yeah, it was like everything. It was like, oh, his love interest is Eleanor. Like, it was a
yes,
lot of
their
stuff.
teacher's Mr. Kite. Like
Yeah.
yeah, everything. Like all
He lives on Penny
Julia,
Lane. Sometimes they were not
John,
very thin.
yeah, everything you could think of. We mined everything, every lyric, and we found some way to make a reference to it in this movie. And then the next year, this movie came out called Across the Universe, which was
Oh, yes. No, you're right. Man, I can't believe I
musical
forgot that.
a musical that used all Beatles music, and every character and everything in that movie was a reference to the entire Beatles catalog, especially the lyrics and common names.
Yes,
So
I forgot. I totally blocked that one out. I think because I
I'd
was like,
say
no.
our movie was Brick Meets Across the Universe, um, before those movies had come out. Now, that is not the reason why our movie did not get made. And I won't really get into that. It's really my fault. Um, Let me tell you, kids, if you have an opportunity to make a summer movie and write a script, talk to your teacher about the process as it's happening.
What's it do?
Cue
Find that
them in.
information.
How's it going? How's the draft coming along? Am I going to have it by when you said? What you should not do is say absolutely nothing. Work in solitude with your best friend, becoming obsessively into this script and this idea, and then be totally heartbroken that it's not happening because you said absolutely nothing to your teacher about it. And so she assumed very rightfully, oh, I thought you weren't working on it because I hadn't heard a single thing from you. I go, that's fair. So anyway, that's another project that never was.
I mean, to connect all of that, I will say I
The lesson in there.
can't think of a more enjoyable time like in my high school life than that period. Like of just it was like a summer of basically being inseparable, eating a ton of cereal, and just writing anything that came out of our mind. And for me, what was amazing was I had a very shotgun approach of thoughts. I'm like, here's 17 ideas, three of which might have a little bit of a gold nugget in it that we can use for something. And then Daniel just sieving it into like a sensible story, like to make a thing that made any sense out of what just came out of my brain.
Yeah, and
And
that's
for
even with one person, that's the writing process. It's just when
yeah,
you have two people, you just get more ideas.
and
And
it was such a joy to feel to be part of that creative process and to be in there. And I was like, this feels amazing. And in a lot of ways, that led to me like, okay, maybe there's an inkling of a canvas now that I could kind of connect to. And I don't know how to really keep pursuing this, but I'm going to keep like anytime Daniel asks for me to be in a movie or anything, I'm going to be there. I'm going to want to be involved with it, which is why when movie we've talked about on the podcast, Marty's Magnificent came along, it was like, yeah, I'm going to be there. What do I do? Like, how do I get involved? I want to be there. And you did something that was really cool, which was you were like, yeah, I'm going to have you act in it. And I was
yeah,
like, okay, hell
and I
yeah.
was like, yeah, if you're serious about doing whatever to make the movie happen, like you should be a producer on the movie. And so as like basically what that means is like logistically, there's just a lot of things that need to get done, and we're just gonna split them up. We're gonna divvy them up and figure out like how they can all get done. Look at the big list and like what can anyone do? So I feel like that was like you, me, and Wesley, and we just did that.
Yeah,
For,
spot fill. Where can we hop in on things?
yeah.
And I'll talk about it because I still look fondly on it. I got to be Barry Bruiser.
Yes, Gabe, you have a
Yeah.
very fun performance in this film, Marty's
I was showing my wife that film recently and I was like, I can't say if I'm a good actor, but man, I had a lot of fun like being involved in every one of those scenes because it was really fun to you kind of cast me as this. I always thought of it as like a part of everyone's dream that's against them,
Yes.
and it's sort of he's universal just because he is like the negative part of us.
Yes.
And so it was we're doing this hot dog eating contest. And I get to just sit there and politely eat a hot dog because I've poisoned the well against Daniel's
Oh yes.
character.
Yeah, yeah.
Like all this fun stuff. And talking to Wesley about it and like getting to film all that stuff and be like, flipping a knife at him and standing in a shower with Paola and called him fish face and this like antagonistic but very like outsiders kind of like or like sharks jets kind of vibe.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like these weird, yeah, lame street gangs. Marty's imagination. It's like
Yeah.
he's never interacted with one in person, but he's just imagining like this is what it's like when you're a teenager. Or whatever. Yeah, yeah, you're just like an antagonistic force. Yeah. And you did quite well, you did quite well at it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're really fun.
But,
You're really committed.
and so that was interesting because that connected us with a number of people in Hemet. That I don't can't say for certain for you, but it felt like that was one of the first times where we were like really found that if you just kind of throw the horn up, a lot of people will answer the call in Hemet.
Mhm.
We just had so many people from all areas just kind of step up and be involved.
Well, I think that movie is like the spirit of that is what's happening right now at the festival of
Hmm.
basically just saying there are creative people who live here. Where are they and how do you meet them? And just through happenstance you actually end up meeting people. And so we met like Michael Tennant and Paola and the whole like theater community that was in Hemet at that time. And many of those people we still work with.
Yeah,
And Marty's Magnificent was filmed in 2010 and it's 2023 now.
that's
And
wild.
the movie that we're showing at the festival Saturday night, The Big Book, actually features Michael Tennant is in that movie. So he was in that movie when we met him 13 years ago, and we're still doing stuff with him.
It's hard not to with Michael. He's such an interesting dude.
He will definitely be on this show.
Oh, I can't wait. Like that'll be so fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, so getting to work with you on that had this kind of door opening experience for me where like I worked with Michael, I worked with Jim Marbury and kind of got involved with doing like stage shows, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, acting.
And
Acting
yeah,
on
and just getting to act. And it's one of those things of like, I don't know if I'll ever have enough confidence to call myself an actor, but I got to do a lot of things that involved acting. And like, I still think the absolute one of my favorite experiences ever was the very first play I did after Marty's was Every Christmas Story Ever Told.
Mhm.
And it's, I don't know if I ever got you out to see it. It's how do I describe it? It's a two-act play, three people total. That's the only actors in it. And it's Every Christmas Story Ever Told mashed together, basically, where the first part is going through like an abbreviated version of everything. And then the twist that I think is absolutely one of my favorite things is the end part is It's a Wonderful Life and A Christmas Carol split down the middle, basically. And so to try to describe it, there's three characters. I get to play kind of the chaotic one in the my version of the play we were doing, and the one character is the sort of straight man who's like, I just want to do Christmas Carol. That's all I care about. And the other character is the sort of sweetheart one who's like, oh, but we didn't get to do these other things. And it's like, okay, fine, we'll do it. But then second act, we get to do my Christmas Carol. Okay. We get to the second act and it's the, oh, but we didn't do It's a Wonderful Life. And now it's like, fine, we'll do both. So the straight man middle character was played by an actor named John Leon has to switch between being Ebenezer Scrooge and help me out, Daniel, the actor, of course, from What's Wonderful Life that my brain's losing.
Sure.
Jimmy Stewart, yes. And so maybe my favorite part is him having to be like, "Oh, Jacob Marley, I won't stand for this." And, oh, it's not often that a man finds himself in this kind of situation, and just having to code switch between those two was like, this play. There's nothing that'll hold a candle to it in the future for me. And just
Wow.
getting to like, you're quickly running to like, we're doing a Macy's Day Parade style thing. Now we're doing an Island of Misfits toys, and I got to stand in a box and be a Charlie in a box the
Yeah.
whole time, and then I got to put on a big fake mustache and be Yukon Cornelius, and just this slapdash approach to it was just so fun. And I was like, if this was acting as like on a stage, even like this is what I want to do. This is so fun. And just kind of got to do a ton of plays going through that. And then just to kind of continue the thread on it was Michael Tennant reached out to me and he does Play with Your Food Productions, where they do dinner theater. And he started being like, "Hey, I got some. What's up?"
That's still happening in Hemet.
Yeah, and he would reach out and be like, "Hey, can you come out and do this part for me?" Or like, "I've got this area I think you'd be a good fit for." Like, it was nice that he kind of had an idea of where my skill set would be, and I'd come out and get to do different plays and dinner theater and stuff, and just sort of do it on top of my day job, and it was a blast, and I got to do a lot of fun. I got to be Lestrade, like in Sherlock Holmes. Like, I got to be a lot of just sort of random different characters. I got to be an Albanian grandfather who didn't speak any English in a play. That was a lot of fun. Tom, Dick, and Harry. That one was a good one. Spent a lot of that play in a couch where you literally have to get folded up into like a couch and then like break out of there playing a trumpet, stage theater.
On your special skills as an actor. I can sit on the couch for most of the play. That's amazing. Yeah. And so, yeah, just seeing how, I mean, that's a great example too of like, oh, I'm going to do this movie. And by acting in this movie, my friends asking me to act in this movie, and we have this history, and like, yeah, I'm going to act and I'm going to bring it. And you brought it, and then everyone's like, Gabe can bring it. And then they start asking you. It's like, that's how people get cast in stuff, is people see them act in other things. And that's just how it happens. And then you're just like, yeah, okay, cool. I'll do that show. I'll do that show. I'll do that show. And just keep, and then it kind of leading us into the movie that's going to be up on the website for this week, for this episode, is the movie adaptation of the centennial play about the city of Hemet, written by Michael Tennant. And this is the film version of it. And so you actually acted in the stage production.
Mm-hmm. So Michael originally had a set cast on it, I believe, for the first run that he did. And one of the actors had to drop out for the role of Sam Temple. It was just one of those things of like, hey, I need you to fill in for this. Can you do it? And then I got to go in and do it. And he's like, that's pretty solid. Like, and he kept having me come back when he would do like new showings of it. And then so when it was like, hey, you guys are doing the film, and I was like, and I got the call on it. This is great. I get to go be that rapscallion, Jim Farrar.
My role from the stage.
Yeah. And there's something incredibly fun about just getting to play the bad guy. Like, comeuppance or not, like there's something so scene chewy about it, where you just get to kind of, if you're being a little hammy, it's sort of expected. You know what I mean? Like, it was a lot of fun. And we got to shoot at Calico Ghost Town.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
Really cool experience.
Yeah. And just like get to wear
while they're open.
Yeah, while they're open, rocking a long trench coat, like just getting to be like full cowboy. I'm like, is this what role play is? Because maybe I'm down with that. Like, this is super cool.
Yeah. So when you watch the movie up on the website this week, you'll see Gabe's performance in it. You'll see that's the role he played on stage and then was adapted. And you'll kind of see that the structure of the film, you can see clearly how it was a play, and just going from one scene to the next. And we really just did as best we could, a cinematic adaptation of the play, and just really embraced that part of it. And this movie has had an interesting life after it was made. So it premiered in 2015 at the historic Hemet Theater, where the film festival is going to be. And I think we showed it like 2 weekends. Like, it ended up playing a lot. And then the theater has shown it multiple times over the last couple of years. They'll do one-off screenings of it. But then during the pandemic, they showed this movie on Hemet cable like 24/7 during the pandemic. Like, I don't know why. No one asked me. No one asked Hemet. I think they assume the city owns it or something.
Yeah.
And like, we'll just show it. I mean, it's totally fine. It's like, who cares? But just really funny. So that like just so many people have seen it because of that.
I got a lot of text messages from my mom going like, it's your face on TV.
On TV again, huh? So, so it's just a really cool, I mean, like, I love you, Gabe, and I love our friendship, and I love just how, I guess in your story and for you and in life, it's like just not knowing where things take you, and that's like just that's just like the reality of life, and just like where you end up and how all the things you've done make you who you are and make you good at what you do and have an impact.
Thank you, Daniel. I love you too. And I am glad to hear it kind of put that way because I think sometimes it can be hard to see it when it's right in front of you. So sometimes having someone else be able to like hold that mirror up and be like, no, man, like this is how things shake out for us. And to tie it back in the film festival world, it's a lot of the people we meet and interact with. It's going to be so fascinating to hopefully have further years continue of this and see like their trajectory and where they go and just all the cool, fascinating ideas and heart and sort of just internalized like here's my guts coming out onto a film that we're going to get to see with all the different makers.
Yeah. Yeah. And continually, like you said. So it's been such a joy and like honor to like be doing this with you as well. Like just being friends for so long and having all these overlapping interests and things we care about and the connection, both growing up in Hemet and being able to do this. And like I'm so glad you suggested the podcast idea. It's so fun. I don't care who's listen. I listen. I don't care.
But also, if you could like and subscribe, we'd appreciate
Please like and subscribe. Please.
Smash that bell button.
But yeah, man, this is such good vibes.
Thank you so much for being the one to interview me this time, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Anytime. Let's do it again.
And so I think the last thing we want to mention, though, is that going forward, we want to make sure that anyone listening that's a filmmaker or involved with this, especially that's been in the film festival this year, please reach out to us. We'd love to have you on, dissect, dive in, deep dive, whatever you want with your film, your background, and just talk to you and share that with the other people that are listening and kind of want to know more. And then ideally, we'll get to show kind of the film that you had on the website as well for people who maybe didn't get to come out and see it. And I think it'll be a lot of fun going forward to just have this podcast kind of keep everyone's like thoughts on us and stuff until we see you next year.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, so enjoy this week's movie, Remembering When, the story of Mr. Whittier's Hemet, starring Gabriel Diaz as Sam Temple, the man who shot Alessandro. And we'll see you tonight, hopefully, or Saturday. And if you're listening to this later, we'll see you next year.
Yeah.
Or next episode, whatever. All right. Anyway, so we are signing off now. Enjoy the film. We'll see you at the festival. Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you, Daniel.